What's up, everyone? It's Andrea. Today, this episode makes my skin crawl. We are not into method acting, and we ask the question, oh my God, how do I make this stop? Come nerd out with us.
Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the number one place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm your co-host, Shereese.
Hey, I'm your co-host, Andrea. Today we're breaking down Season 6, Episode 21, Frame of Mind. This episode was written by Brannon Braga and directed by James L. Conway. In this episode, Commander Riker switches between mental realities, performing in one of Dr. Crusher's plays, preparing for an undercover away mission, and being an inmate in an alien asylum for the criminally insane charged with murder. He and we cannot tell what's real.
Bum, bum, bum.
Oh my God.
So this week we're going to get a little flippy flop. Last week, Andrea really loved that episode, and I did not. I very much did not. I thought it was slow and pointless. This week, this is an episode that kind of lives rent-free in my head. I think about it a lot, but I can't say I love it because it's disturbing. So it's not like enjoyable or like fun or anything. But I do think it's a well-told story. Andrea despises stories like this.
Mm-hmm, I do.
So we're going to get the opposite experience, I think, of last week's, where one of us was like, yay, and the other one was like, boo. This time we're going to have that thing reversed. So
no, my initial thoughts, I just wrote,
no, God! No, God, please, no!
It freaks me out. It's super disturbing.
Mm-hmm.
I will say my final thoughts on it are pretty much the same. However, I will say the fact that I was so disturbed is a testament to how good the writing is on the episode and how well it's actually made, because the point of it was to be dark and disturbing, and it was like mission accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
But I freaking hate this episode. Even talking about it, I'm like, ugh, like I don't.
Yeah, and it really does. It's really different from last week's in the sense that I personally found last week's episode boring, but this week's episode is disturbing, and that's a different kind of discomfort, right?
Yes.
So if something's kind of slow, you're kind of like, whatever. But if something's actually disturbing, then you're like freaked out about it. It gives you like much bigger emotions. So I don't know. Maybe we can try to go kind of quickly through it to limit the distress.
Oh my God.
Andrea.
Well, it also probably doesn't help that I watched it at like midnight last night, because like my day just kind of got away from me, and I was like, I need to watch this episode before I go to bed.
Hey, same. We were both watching at midnight.
Yeah. Oh my God. Because oh my God. So I'm going to start off by saying, all right, I'm already freaked out by scene 1. Okay, Act 1, Scene 1. Riker is looking disheveled and he's acting erratically. He appears to be pleading his case to like a parole board. He says he's accepting responsibility for what he's done and he's ready to rejoin society. And the unseen judge isn't super impressed by what he's saying, but he sounds awfully like Data. So I'm like, okay, something isn't right. So Riker starts getting more and more agitated. And then he fumbles his line and we see him kind of break. He's like, wait, line. And it's like, okay. He's rehearsing a play with Beverly and Data. And like
my first thing was different. I said, wow, Riker's so handsome, even when he's disheveled. That's what I wrote.
I mean, he is. He looked
like a very handsome homeless man.
Yeah, he really did. Even knowing this was a play was just making my skin crawl. Like it was just making my skin crawl. And, Beverly's like, we've been at this for hours, kind of the same as last week. We've been at this for hours. Maybe we just get, a fresh take tomorrow. So he's heading to his quarters and he's rehearsing his outburst lines from the play, but he's sort of speaking them over and thinking them over and acting them out as he's walking to his quarters. So he's getting like looks from people
in the hallway,
and the camera work looks shaky. Like I'm already feeling the heebie-jeebies. And as he gets into the turbo lift, he bumps into this like oddly sinister looking alien who just gives him the creeps. And then he goes into the turbo lift and the turbo lift doors and it's credits. And it's like, ugh, we're already in this weird like psychological thriller. And I hate it. I hate it so much.
So for me at this point, I was just kind of laughing because he's walking down the hallway talking to himself. And he's like, saying these words of like, every time I get so close, how could you? And all this stuff. So he's clearly arguing with someone.
My mind. It's like, ooh, this is not shit you need to be saying out loud.
He's clearly arguing with someone who no one else can see. So that one crewman who looks backwards is like, oh, okay. I mean, imagine you're second in command of the ship, walking around looking disheveled and talking to themselves. That would immediately be a comm over to Beverly and Troy to be like, emergency. Like, I don't know what's going on. And then when we see this alien, like, I don't know. He didn't look particularly sinister to me. It just was this weird moment where Riker kind of like recognized him, but didn't know where he recognized him from and was staring at him. And then he walked away and you were like, okay, there's clearly some past history between these two, but what could it possibly be? Because it seems so out of context. So that kind of starts the mystery. So after the credits, we find out that there is something going on Telonis 4. The government just collapsed. The prime minister was assassinated. And there's a Federation research team on the planet that's in hiding because the people who are vying for power are looking for technological like leverage or you know whatever can help them with getting more power. And so getting a Federation research team would be a great piece of leverage. So it's Riker's job to go down to the planet and find them and evacuate them. And for some reason, he has to go alone and undercover, which I don't understand even a little bit. Into a war zone, this makes no sense.
Yeah, that still makes no sense. Yeah, that still makes no sense to me. But you know what I will say is I love how Picard is like, the prime minister has been assassinated, the government's collapsed, it's complete anarchy. It still cracks me up that every planet has like a single planetary leader.
Yeah.
Right? Like, who would be the single world leader for us? We can't decide on that. Like, that's just, it just blows my mind that it's like, just once in Trek, I would like to see them get to some world and there are like hundreds of different leaders for each different country, like the way we have now. But like the one leader, it's still, that concept cracks me the F
up. So much more
like,
complicated though, if we did it that way.
Yeah, it really would be. Now, Worf starts prepping Riker for the super secret mission and he tries, Riker's cracking some jokes, but Worf is not having it. And he tells Riker that he needs to know how to use the Nisrad, this ceremonial blade. Why? I don't know.
It's a Telonian blade that they use for bartering for when they do like deals at the market or whatever.
Okay.
So he said, so he was telling him, you need to know how to use this blade so that you can like interact with the people on the planet to get information and stuff. And so he's showing him, pay close attention. This is how you hold it. This is how you kind of like move it. And so as he's showing him the motions of how to hold this blade, he accidentally nicks Riker. He cuts him on his temple. And it was such a like shocking moment because you're like, wait, did he really just cut him? And he starts bleeding. You're like, what just happened? And Worf
Worf is someone who plays with blades a lot and does a lot of blade work. That's a sloppy mistake. I was like, that doesn't sound like something Worf would do. But anyway, Riker hits the sickbay to get that healed up. He's got a little blood on his temple and Beverly jokes like, you will do anything to get out of this role in the play, because he's feeling really stage frighty about it and he's not feeling confident in his role and like the play's tomorrow. So he's like, shut up, So Beverly's like, you will do anything to get out of this and fixes him up. And as he turns to leave, an engineer is carried in to sickbay with severe plasma burns, like a plasma torch blew up in his hands. And Beverly and the whole team are like, we need 50 cc's. And I got to say, this is the grittier side of the night shift that I like to see. Like industrial accidents will be happening on a starship. And we rarely ever see that. You see one person in sickbay in a bathing suit who's like, I tucked instead of curling on this high dive on this holographic world I was playing at. Like, that's okay. Yeah. Like you dislocated a shoulder river rafting, O'Brien, but like really like a plasma torch exploding in your hands and causing severe plasma burns. That's some real ER stuff right there. And I really enjoyed seeing that because I was like, this is what it would be more like in real life.
Yeah.
Anyway, but as Beverly's sedating this engineer, the engineer like stares at Will in this really like unsettling way again. And Riker is like freaked out and scrams. And he goes to talk to Deanna about the whole experience. And he's like, over the last few days, I feel like people are staring at me. So maybe it's not me, like that guy in the turbo lift and the engineer. Like, I feel like I'm living in Frame of Mind. And Troy's like, I'm sorry, what? And he's like, Frame of Mind is the name of the play. It's Beverly's play. And she's like, oh, you might really just be an actor. Like you're getting into your role in Frame of Mind. Your character is crazy and is trying to convince people he's not or whatever. And like, feels like people are staring at him and messing with him. So like, you might just be carrying that over like into your real life. So like, I encourage you to actually like kind of draw on those darker feelings that the play brings out. Like,
Yeah. So basically she's describing like that method acting where people get into the character, whether it's a serial killer or a school teacher, they really, really get into it. They embody it and they become that person even in their off hours. So that way they don't kind of like lose the vibe. And so Troy's saying like, that's just what's happening with you. Probably you're just really incorporating this character into your daily life, which is a good sign. It means that you're getting really good at acting or something. And then she's also saying, like, Yeah, like you said, like explore it. Don't be afraid of it. Have fun with it. Like explore this part of you that you usually don't really access. So part of that I'm like, yes, and then part of that is no. I think I mentioned before on the show or on our podcast that like briefly, when you and I were learning how to play Dungeons and Dragons a few years ago, I played this little like criminal hobbit named Bree, who was a total baddie, but like the crew that he was rolling with didn't know all of his background. So I got to play this character who was just like really tough and like really didn't care about people's feelings and was super rude and stuff like that. And I had so much fun because it's so the opposite of how I usually interact with people. So I got to really explore that kind of like being the villain. So that was fun. However, this is not that. This is not like Riker's exploring being a villain. This is like he's exploring being like ostracized. There's nothing fun about that. He's paranoid and feeling like people are looking at him and talking about him.
Yeah, he's not
There's
enjoying
nothing
this.
fun about that. Yeah, there's not like when she's saying have fun with it. I'm like, that's not fun.
In regards to like method acting, one of my favorite actors is Daniel Day-Lewis. Like he's just so incredible in so many roles. And the first role that I was introduced to him in was as he played Bill the Butcher in Gangs of New York. And that was the first time I'd ever seen him that I could recall. And I was like, oh my God, this man has such presence on the screen. He's so terrible. Like he was a butcher who ended up being like one of the leaders of one of the gangs of New York in like the 18 somethings. And so they were having these like gang wars and they were having these like turf battles where they were all slicing each other up and having these crazy battles. It was really, really intense.
Sounds horrible.
It's a really great movie. It's one of my favorites. It's so intense. But Bill the Butcher is played by Daniel Day-Lewis, who just like, holy shit, he's terrifying on screen. But I did some reading about him and he's very, very method. So this movie was set in like the 18 somethings. And so he lived the entire production as though he was in the 1800s and like would dress that way. This is stuff I had like read online that he like dressed that way, like in his real life. And he got really sick with pneumonia and refused like medical treatment, anything that was like antibiotics or anything like he would not accept because it was like not in keeping with the time. And at that point I was like, buddy,
yeah, that's ridiculous.
Just take the antibiotics for fuck's sake.
Yeah, you could die from pneumonia.
Yeah, you could die from this. Like, this is not worth it. I mean, his
like
role
letting
was
himself
like,
get gangrene and chopping off his leg to be more true to the role. No,
he also played Abraham Lincoln in Lincoln, and he actually, I think he won like an Oscar for that. Maybe I may be conflating some movies, but I remember in his acceptance speech, he always. And in real life, he's a very soft-spoken, like gentle soul. But in Bill the Butcher, he's like this terrifying murderer. But in his acceptance speech, he thanked his wife because he was like, it's basically unbearable to live with me when I'm method for my acting because my wife has to live with like all these different characters based on the projects I take. And I was like, yeah, that sounds awful.
Yeah. I'm like, if I was his wife, I'd be like, no, I don't. You're going to get an apartment for when you're on a job. And I will see you in 6 months.
And you will call me in the evenings to check in or whatever.
I'm not sleeping with Bill the Butcher.
Yes.
Nope. I'm good. Nope.
So the whole method thing, yeah, Deanna being like, lean into the dark side. It's like, you're not exploring your like deep, dark fantasies. You're exploring feeling like you're insane. That's not fun.
It's not fun. Let's not explore that.
No. So listen, the play happens. It's an incredible success. He kills his lines during the applause. I call him Lieutenant Creepy, that one lieutenant from the turbo lift, like appears out of nowhere and is staring at him. And it's really unsettling because everybody's like, bravo, bravo, encore. And they're clapping. And Lieutenant Creepy is just standing there immobile, just staring at him.
Yeah. So and his name's Lieutenant Suna. And he's between Troy and Picard. But it's like all the other times we get little glimpses of the audience, he's not there. But I don't know if they actually show Picard and Troy, but he's like not there.
They do. And then he appeared out of nowhere.
He appears and he's sitting between them and it's like the center of the audience. So it's like the forefront of Riker's vision. And you're like, was that guy there a minute ago? I feel like that guy wasn't there. Why is that guy clapping? What's the deal with this guy? Why is he looking at him like that? You have so many questions. So many.
Now, of course, during the applause, like Lieutenant Creepy appears and is staring at him and freaked out. Like Riker's like, let me just do one more. You know, he's doing all his bows. So he's like, ooh, okay, I'm going to bow. He bows. And when he comes up from his bow, he's alone.
He actually, when he comes up from the bow, the third time, everyone's gone and he's staring at a gray wall about a foot in front of him. So now he's in an enclosed room, whereas before he was in a playroom, a theater.
In 10 forward,
And the applause immediately stops. The people are gone. It's totally silent. There's a wall in front of him and he's like, what the heck? And he turns around and he's in a room and there's a guy there. And you're like, and he's just
know.
like, what just happened?
I know. And
Blink
the
of an
man
eye.
says, I can see we have a lot of work to do, which is the same line that Data gave as like the doctor or the judge
as his
or whatever.
final line before he walked out.
His final line. And it's an alien that looks like Lieutenant Creepy. He's got the same like forehead ridges. And I'm like, oh my God, what is happening? Like that to me is super terrifying. I think that like I've seen enough people sort of lose their grip on what's real that this was just very triggering for me to watch, where I was like, ooh, is this what it's actually like in some people's minds and in their reality? Like, that's why it gave me the heebie-jeebies so much. And I think that another reason why this whole episode creeps me out, and this whole idea, is that our reality is very paper thin. The constructs that we define as reality are really thin and can shatter at any moment, is what it feels like. And this is like reinforced in this episode, where it's like, oh my God, your reality is only as solid as your belief in it in any given time. And if you start to believe something else, suddenly that reality starts shifting, and then you start seeing things different ways that are not real, and it's just, oh my God, it's super disturbing to me.
Yeah, I think that for me, reality is always a construct, because we're always deciding, like, if somebody says something to us, we're always deciding what that thing meant. What was the interpretation? And that determines how we behave with them. Like if we're happy or if we're pissy or whatever. Yeah. So we are always creating our own experience of reality, whether it really happened that way or didn't really happen that way. It's how we felt or how we thought or how we interpreted. And so we're going to behave accordingly. So I always feel like, it's always a construct. We're just not always aware of it. But in this case, this is not like what I picture people who have schizophrenia might experience, where they're still, it's more like the playhouse and then Lieutenant Suna shows up. It's more like there's something strange in this environment that wasn't here before, but now it's here, versus what's going on here, where Riker has literally been transported to a whole nother location. It's not like he's walking down the halls of the Enterprise and then he sees somebody there that no one else sees. It's like he's in a room where he was in a theater. Everything is different. And then this doctor is talking to him and basically trying to say, do you remember who you are? Do you remember where you are? And trying to kind of bring him back. Where did you go right now? So it seems like Riker's just had some kind of hallucination where he was literally like unconscious or something. And now he's just kind of woken back up. And so the doctor's like, do you remember anything? And Riker's like, what are you talking about? I was doing a play. I was on the ship. He remembers everything until the doctor says, what's your name? And then he goes, I'm, and he doesn't remember.
And he's like, a second ago, I knew the answer. Like it just fell out of my brain is what it feels like. And this Dr. Cyrus, is trying to help him jog his memory. And he's in Ward 47 of the Talonis Institute for Mental Disorders. And I was like, oh my God, what the fuck? So it looks like Talonis was the mission that he was planning to undertake, right? Yeah. So it feels very similar to season 4's Future Imperfect, where he's trapped in this multi-layered simulation that messes with his memories and perception of reality. That's what I was getting big shades of. By the way, that doctor, he probably doesn't look familiar to you at all, but he's been in another episode of Star Trek. Do you remember? Does he look remotely familiar to you? Did it jog a memory?
Nope.
It didn't for me either. I looked it up. He played Waylon from The Big Goodbye, the historian who
the one who got shot like immediately. That guy.
Yeah.
No, of course, I didn't remind. It didn't remind me of him.
Why would you? Why would anybody? But still, I was like, oh, here he is again. Hey, Waylon.
He wasn't even the gangster. He was the one who got shot.
Like he was the one who got shot. I know he was the main gangster who looked pretty like, like he had a very like memorable face.
Oh, yeah, no, he was very face, like the gangster face.
He had a memorable face, right? But like Waylon was like, "Hey, I'm here, bang! I'm dying.
I'm gone." So yeah,
sorry, I third wheeled your date, Picard. Anyway, now an armed guard come to take Riker. They come to take Riker to get some spiny lobefish stew, and I was like, "Ooh." This asylum, by the way, is the stuff of nightmares. Like people are screaming in different rooms or talking to themselves. He sits down and a woman comes to tell him that she's also Starfleet and they've been kidnapped and experimented on. And she's like, these people, and these are like, some people are like painting. Some people are playing with blocks. And she's like, we've been kidnapped and experimented on. There are 3 ships in orbit and they're ready to beam us out. And Riker's like, okay, let's go. And then she pulls a fucking spoon out of her sleeve and tries to speak to it like a comm badge. And Riker's like, oh, fuck.
Yeah, because her whole speech was very convincing.
Yeah.
Like, very believable until she pulls out the spoon. And then you're like, oh man, like she's dangerous crazy, because she's the crazy that seems believable, which by having that character talk to Riker, it's like, oh, that's exactly how I am, right? Because Riker was so convinced, and then he wasn't convinced. And so
then he was convinced again, and then not convinced. Like he's already like flip-flopping so much.
And then he sees kind of a mirror in her of like, this is what I must seem like, because I was so convinced, but like, she's talking to a spoon. Am I going to be talking to a spoon? So she gets up, Mavek, who is the orderly / guard, it like comes out and is like, hey, we told you, like, you know, first of all, he teases her and is like, are you talking to your spoon again? And she's just like, whatever. And she goes to storm off, and he's like, hey, you can't take silverware out of the cafeteria. And she's like, fine, and gives him her spoon. And then he comes over and starts talking to Riker. And I just wrote in my notes, Mavek is a dick. He's just like one of those people who likes to pick on people who can't defend themselves.
He's the stereotypical like prison guard with a Napoleon complex, who specifically seeks out that job so he can exert his little power over people, but in the real world would get his ass kicked.
Yes. Even though, so he's just like baiting Riker and teasing him and saying all this stuff to him. And he explains to Riker why he's here. Because Riker's just like, why am I here? Like, what is going on? And he says, like, basically you killed someone. But the way he does it is like, oh, when you came, there was so much blood on you. Could barely get it off. Can't believe you mutilated that guy. Like
he was enjoying the shit out of that.
Yeah.
He was.
Yeah. So of course he goes one step too far, and Riker jumps up to throttle him, even though this guy is bigger than him, which is saying a lot because Riker's huge.
He's like 6'4". Yeah. He's really big.
So, but he's throttling this guard. And then the other guards / orderlies come out to like pull him off. And then Mavek, with such satisfaction, injects Riker with something to knock him out. And it's like, you were baiting him just so you could inject him.
Yeah. Like you had that needle with you already. Like you clearly were planning this.
Yeah. This was all you have to look forward to today. And that is really sad. So then Riker wakes up in a panic, but now he's back on the Enterprise. And now he thinks that was a dream. And a horrible dream. I would say it a clear nightmare. And he tells Beverly immediately, which is great, because not only is she directing the play, but she's also a doctor, right? And so she's like, I think it's just like, it's just getting to you, you know, like the stress and all of that.
Well, here's I feel like the difference too, like for us as a viewer, because we are not, you know, there's a couple of different types of mysteries you can have. Like one where we as a viewer know who the murderer was and we're just watching everybody else figure it out, or we go on the journey with them, right? And so we're on the journey with Riker, and the way like dream sequences are filmed, they feel dream sequency, right? So you as a viewer can tell like this was a nightmare, like things don't make sense as they do in real dreams, right? But this, like, everything made perfect sense. It was physically all real. We were there with him. So we're like,
that wasn't a dream.
That was not a dream, right? But also, like, here's Beverly being like, but it was, and here's everything. And, you know, like, it's just, that's what's so disturbing about it. If this was like the standard, like, dream sequence harp that we hear, like that for us is like the telltale signs, like, okay, this is clearly a dream. But because it was real for us as well, we're like, fuck, which one of these is real?
Yeah, because when he's in, and we kind of discover this later, when he's in the hospital, he feels like everything on the Enterprise was a dream. He can't remember any of it. He can't remember his name. He can't remember the details. But when he's on the Enterprise, it's like clearly all this hospital stuff is a dream. He remembers it, but he remembers it like remembering a bad dream. So he's like, oh yeah, it's definitely not real. So that's a tough thing when your dreams actually feel real. So we do the play again, and it's again a success. And I am just like really impressed by Riker's bravery to go on that set and to turn his back on absolutely any part of it at any point, because I just wouldn't trust it, dream or no dream. But he does, and they do a phenomenal job. And again, everyone's applauding, and he looks up and he sees Lieutenant Suna again sitting between Picard and Troy.
Well, hold on. The play doesn't actually go the way it did in the dream. Like, he keeps pausing because he's like hearing noises. He's hearing bangs. The door of the asylum in the play is the same as the door in the asylum that he's been trapped in. So he looks at the door and it has a circular, like a porthole window. And he sees that like super dick orderly.
Mavek.
Thank you. He sees Mavek looking at him and smiling and kind of taunting him. And he goes back and he looks again and there's nothing there. And so he keeps having these pauses, and Beverly has to be like, and then the next line is, right? She's like trying to kind of help him get recentered and refocused. So he finishes it. And that's when they're all clapping. But then that's when we see Lieutenant Suna between Picard and Worf again. And it's like, and Riker's like, you're the key to the whole thing. And he grabs him and he screams really intensely. He's like, who are you?
And he's like, Lieutenant Suna, sir. Sorry, sir.
And everybody
like,
surrounds him and they're like, whoa, Will. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Right? So Beverly takes him to sickbay to check him out. And I'm like, oh my God, the suspense is killing me. Like, what the F is going on?
Yeah, you're like, definitely check him out because that was
my God.
very unusual behavior.
This one stressed me out.
This is like method acting gone too far or something.
Yep.
So
just take the fucking antibiotics. Okay.
she scans him up and down. And she's like, I can't find anything to explain these hallucinations. Like, you have been hallucinating. I hear you. And I can't find the medical source so that it can be treated. And so she figures like, maybe it's just, I don't know, maybe it's just like you're really tired. Maybe it's stress or something. And Riker's like, that's not it. And she's like, well, I can't find anything else that could explain it. So maybe it's just something more subtle. Like you just need some rest or need a break or something like that. But in the end, she goes, you know what? The play's over. Put it out of your mind. If that was causing stress,
it's done. Yeah,
it's done. And at least that's gone. And so he's like, yeah, you're right. You're right. Like, at least it's over. Like, I can just put it behind me. Maybe it was the creepy images from the play. That's what was just in my subconscious. Fine.
Mm-hmm.
So he leaves and he's walking back and he's still in his like outfit, in his asylum outfit that he was wearing in the play, because he went directly from there to sickbay. So he's like, okay. He's walking down the hallways and he turns the corner and he sees that woman with the spoon in the hallway.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, I forget what she says to him. I don't know if she speaks or not, but anyways, he sees her.
I think she was just standing there and he's like, oh, not real.
I feel like she said something like, don't let them, whatever she said to him when they met.
Don't let them tell you you're crazy or something like that.
Yeah. Exactly.
Which is exactly if you were crazy. And I say this word, I don't say that word lightly, because there's a lot of weight behind that. But she basically, it's, if you were struggling with mental illness that like fucked with your reality, that's exactly what someone
would say. Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what a hallucination would say to you if it was a hallucination.
Don't let them think it's a hallucination.
Like, yeah, don't let them think it's like don't let them tell you you're crazy. And Deanna walks into his quarters and she's like, why don't you try the relaxation techniques I sent you? And when Riker's like, no, we hear Dr. Cyrus's voice like superimposed saying,
maybe you need another treatment.
And so he's like, right? It's like, what is happening? And then in the turbo lift, the doors open to his hallway, but it's not the hallway, it's the psychiatric hospital hallway. So he's like, it's not real. And he kind of, to me, it also gives me a lot of like Night Terrors vibes, right? Where like they were being kidnapped and experimented on. And that's what it felt like too. So these two realities start colliding, like
in a really weird way.
Yeah, every time he looks around, he's either on the Enterprise or on the Asylum, and it's super terrifying because we are as in the dark as Riker is.
Yeah, so at some point he just starts running. Like after he sees this woman in the hallway, he just starts running because he's like, I have to get out of here. And poor thing, he's on a ship. Where can he go? So he starts running. And he goes to his quarters and he runs in the doors and he's like kind of leaning against the doors, like breathing hard, like I've escaped. And then as soon as he hears his door, instead of making that soft little when it closes, it makes this hard metallic like clang.
Yeah.
And so he turns around and boom, he's back in the asylum. And you're like, no, oh man, he like thought he made it out, but now he's back in and it's so unfortunate. And he's just kind of like trying to figure out what to accept. So in the next scene, we see him talking to Dr. Cyrus saying, I need help. I want to stop having these delusions, which, good for him. That's to me, that's always a sign of good mental health. When you're like, something's fishy. I need help. Like, let me get help now before this gets any worse. And he's like, I don't.
Yeah, because if you leave mental health untreated, it just gets worse. Like it does not get better on its own.
Like it's not like a self-healing.
Spoiler alert. Yeah, it doesn't get better on its own. You actually have to like ask for help and accept that you need help.
And then get the help and then do
it. Which but if you have mental illness, you can't ask for help and you can't accept that you need help, which is the horrific paradox of mental illness. Yeah.
So he's like, at this point, he's kind of like, I don't really care which one's a dream. Just make one of these stop. So he's like, we're here. I got a doctor in this one, who's like willing to do something. So he's like, what can we do?
Seems nice enough. Yeah.
Yeah. Seems like a nice guy. What can we do to just make this stop? And he also feels like when he's in the asylum, he feels like this is more real. to him and the Enterprise because he can't even remember his name and stuff. That all feels
Yeah.
like so fake. So this must be the real reality. And he's like, I will do anything. I just can't be doing back and forth because it's freaking me out. And that actually makes me feel crazy.
Mhm.
So Cyrus tells him there's two options. They can do this reflection therapy where he like interacts with different facets of his personality, which is kind of a throwback to last week's episode when we were talking about each of us has like different personas inside of us.
Voices. Yeah.
And he said we could do that. And then if that doesn't work, our other option is basically like a space lobotomy. Like we're going to just do a brain wipe and just like hard reset on your brain, and you'll have a totally new personality, but you also won't have any of these disturbing thoughts anymore. So there's that. And then he says, and there's a time pressure here because you did kill that guy. So the only reason you weren't on trial for that is because you weren't mentally competent to stand trial. So cool to know that they have the same kind of legal systems that we have.
I know. I was
America.
like, this is very like bureaucratic.
Right. Most of the
In,
plans
like,
are just
a
like
space war.
kill him. Like if you kill somebody, they just punish you. But so he was like, you couldn't stand trial. So if we need to make you, when we make you well, you'll be well enough to stand trial for murder. So it's not like, it's kind of like from out of the pan and into the fire, right?
Yeah,
like,
out of the frying pan into the fire. Yeah.
So he's like, okay, let's try the reflection therapy and see if we can like figure this out. And then I actually had a question for you in this particular scene. Would you do reflection therapy? Like if you could do what Riker goes on to do, where they scan your brain and then like people physically show up in front of you to interact with them to help you work through your past issues. Would you do that?
Yeah. Yeah, I would. I mean, Riker didn't really have a choice in the matter because it was either that or a lobotomy, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, let's
have a good
start with
choice.
option one. Yeah. There was only one choice he could make. That was it. But if I was not like, in an institution for the criminally insane, if I was just me going about my life and, I place a high value on like mental health and wellness. And so I have my weekly therapy sessions that are very, very useful and helpful for me. If my therapist was like, hey, we have this technology, we can do this to help sort of like bring these matters to the forefront, I would be totally down with that. I think that kind of thing though also requires like preparation in the correct setting, right? Like you probably want like trusted people with you because it might trigger some really upsetting stuff that would be really difficult to process on your own. But like with a therapeutic team working with you, that would be really helpful because we all have behaviors that we are not conscious of, but other people are, right? Where they're like, oh, Andrea always does this and this. And I think the reason why she consistently does this is because of XYZ issue that she has or whatever, right? But like, I am not aware of those always. Like, so, we're aware of some of our things, but we also are very unaware of other things that we do that other people notice. It'd be really helpful to kind of have all of that brought to the table to be like, oh, wow, like I didn't realize I did that. I didn't realize this is where that came from or why or how. Like I would totally do that. Would you? What do you think?
Oh, for sure. if I wasn't mentally unstable at the time, I would absolutely do it. But if I was in Riker's situation where you're like, it's kind of like, no. I mean, like you said, he didn't have many good choices. But if you're in like a psychotic break, like that's maybe not the time to do this kind of therapy.
Nope.
I mean, it was between that and the lobotomy. So yes, do this. But like, let's just say you didn't have to get a lobotomy as your other option. If I was in the middle of a break, like, no, let's not do this because I'm already seeing things and hallucinating. And then you want to bring more hallucinations to reality. Like, no. But if I was mentally like not at that place, anything less than a total full break, I would absolutely do this kind of therapy because I think it would be extremely helpful because really it's your own brain telling you what you're struggling with subconsciously as a holographic form. And I think that's really, really cool. I would absolutely do it in a heartbeat. So we need this therapy and some hypo sprays. I think in tandem, those would be amazing. So Riker does this therapy and this beam scans his brain and brings out his internal aspects, which happen to be people from the crew. So we get Troy, who is like representing his feelings and thoughts. Worf, who's representing like his protection when he feels danger.
Yes.
And then Picard, who represents like his logic and stuff, which is really cool. Like,
I love that.
It totally
They
fits.
were perfect.
They were perfect. And the three of them, kind of like that chorus in that episode with the deaf guy. It was kind of like that, like this chorus of people. The three of them are telling him what happened the night he stabbed that guy. Yeah. And they're all taking turns telling a part of the story. And it sounds like he was walking down a dark alley, got jumped, and he like defended himself and stabbed some guy.
With the ceremonial blade, yeah.
With the ceremonial blade that he had, the only weapon he had on hand. So you're kind of like, okay, well, this feels a little bit more like self-defense than like straight up murder. Like I walked down an alley to kill some guy. That sounds different. But that's kind of what we hear. And so at the end, we're like, oh, that's the story. But then Troy steps forward and says, don't believe any of this. This is all a lie. None of this is true. And then it's like, wait a minute. Right. And then Worf steps up and Picard steps up and they're all like, yeah, none of this is true. This is all a trick. Like you are still in the Enterprise. And he's like, he keeps looking back at Dr. Cyrus to be like, do you hear this? Are you here? Is this true? Like what's going on? And Dr. Cyrus is saying nothing, like as if he can't even see them. He's not saying anything. So now Riker's like, what the heck?
Hell? Yeah.
And then, he's just like, this can't be true. This is a delusion. Everything's a delusion. And he's like, the whole reason he did this therapy was to prove that all this was delusions, and the delusions start telling him they're not delusions. So it's really backfiring, in a big way.
Which means was like my stomach was just churning at this point. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, which means his only option at this point is lobotomy, which is so unfortunate.
Yeah. So he's kind of able to banish them, to be like, you're not real, right? And then they go away and the doctor's like, good job. Now the next scene, Riker is asleep in his cell, and I just want to pause and say, what the F was that triangular pillow that they gave him to sleep on? How's anybody supposed to sleep on that thing? Well, how are you supposed to sleep comfortably?
Their windows are triangles too.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just,
well, their doors are triangular, and then their doors are like triangle, round. Yeah. So it's like, man, y'all are really. It's like Battlestar Galactica with all the papers or have the little corners cut,
or octagons or whatever.
Yeah. And it's like, huh? But Data and Worf bust in their like super secret ninja gear, and they're like, it's a rescue team. So he thinks they're all delusions. So he fights back, because what's really happening is we have an extraction team like coming to get him, I guess.
Yeah, but like the day before this, he after he banished the delusions, he was in the cafeteria and Beverly comes by to talk to him.
Oh my God.
He's like, she's a delusion. And so while she's talking to him, he's just like ignoring her and trying to eat and ignoring her. This to me felt more like somebody who's like experiencing schizophrenia or something like that, where they're hearing and seeing someone where they're like, I know you're not there, but this person is very insistent that they in fact are there, and you're trying to ignore them. And so he's ignoring Beverly, and Beverly's like, I'm sorry that you're here. We're going to try to get you out. And she tries to ask him questions like, do you remember me? Do you know who I am? Do you know who you are? And he's not answering anything. He's not even looking at her. But she's like, look, you've got the government has been stonewalling. They refuse to acknowledge you're even here. So they've like kidnapped you basically and brainwashed you. But we're going to get you out of here. I promise. So she leaves. Then that night is when Data and Worf bust into his room to save him. So it's kind of like he had some warning that they were going to come and get him. And now they come to get him. And he's like, your delusions, get away from me. And he's yelling and screaming and trying to get away. And they basically have to manhandle him. Like Data grabs him, picks him up, and drags him to their transport. And they get in a little scuffle with the guards, but the guards are really no match for Data and Worf at all.
Yeah, no.
Like
Data.
They fold instantly like lawn chairs, and they take Riker back to sickbay, and he's like explaining to them his experience, and he's like, it all seems so real. All of this seemed like a delusion. And at this point, his head is bleeding from this whole ordeal. So Beverly, scans it and heals all the skin. And then after Riker's done talking, he's like, his head hurts again, and he touches it and he's bleeding again. And he's like, wait a minute, how am I bleeding again when you just healed the bleeding? And she's like, oh, it's fine, I can fix it. He's like, no, that's not the point. You already fixed it.
Yeah. Now what's going on?
This is not real. And they're like, what are you talking about? And he knocks over Worf and snatches up his phaser. And he's like, nope, none of this is real. This can't be real. And Picard's like, think about what you're doing right now. And he's like, I know exactly what I'm doing. He's got this phaser. I'm guessing it's set to kill. Who knows? And it looks like he's about to just start firing on them, this is the scary thing. When someone has a mental health, like total crisis, and then they have a weapon. Like that is this is worst case scenario.
Neutralize.
Yeah. But he's like, I understand. He doesn't want to fire on these people, even if they're fake. So he turns the phaser on himself, which is what a lot of people do not do. But he turns the phaser on himself, and then everybody around him shatters. But he's
like
fine.
Broken glass.
Yeah, like broken glass. Yeah. And that's kind of like, what the F just happened? And he's back not only is he back in his room, but now there's like 4 of the different doctors around, and they're all sitting talking about his case like he's not there. And they're like, guess we're going to have to do that lobotomy. Yep, we're definitely going to have to do it. That's the only thing that's going to work. And he's like, what's going on? Because I just shot myself with a phaser. I should have died, but instead the Enterprise disappeared. And the guy's like, that's not a phaser in your hand. It's a knife. now give me the knife so that you don't hurt yourself. And it's like, that was a really stupid lie. A knife is still a really dangerous weapon, but knives also can't like shoot. So he's just like, you know what? I'm setting this phaser to level 16, which maybe is the highest level now, because he says it's going to like blast away half of the hospital.
It's the level right above grilled cheese sandwich. So
yeah, I think
it's really powerful.
It's the one that Worf used to tunnel a hole into the side of the mountain.
There you go.
Right? It was level 16. So it can it can blast through rocks apparently. So he's like, it's going to blast away half of the ward. And who cares who's in the floor? Who cares who's on the other side of this blast?
Yeah.
And so he blasts it. And it's like, again, things just start shattering and shattering and shattering.
Yeah.
And shattering.
He's like back on the Enterprise, back on the Asylum, back and forth, back and forth.
He's like, yeah, he's in the play.
God
and
damn.
Then everybody's applauding. And he's like talking to the doctor and he's like, what's going on? And everyone applauds louder. And he's like, this is fake. And everyone applauds louder. And he pushes the doctor and everyone stands up and gives a standing ovation because he's fighting the doctor. And he's just like, blah! And then he slams himself into the wall and then he shatters and he wakes up. What we assume is waking up, but he's woken up like a million times. So we don't know if he's really awake, but he wakes up and this time
I hate this.
He's on a medical slab. And there's this
feels like night terrors again.
Yeah. And there's this probe in the side of his head that kept bleeding throughout the entire episode. And you're like, okay, this one probably is real reality, unlike all the other real realities, because this is the one place he's never, ever been.
He hasn't been before,
in all of these back and forth situations. So he's looking around and he sees his little necklace that he was given for his away mission. And inside the necklace was a comm badge, like hidden inside. So he sees the necklace like by his feet and he looks over and he sees like the doctors who are never paying attention when he wakes up.
Never.
Thankfully.
Yeah.
So they're like, wait a minute, according to these sensor readings, he's awake. And so they turn over, they race over to him to try to like put him back down or whatever. He knocks the guy over, snatches up his necklace, pushes the comm badge, and he's like, Worf, get me the hell out of here.
Yeah.
And then instantly he's transported out. And the doctors are like, no.
I know. By the way, thank God Worf was at his station and not like walking through the hallway or something where there was nobody to get him out in that moment. Yeah, the doctor's like, damn it, as because he grabs the knife and points it at the doctor and he's like, emergency Enterprise, Enterprise emergency transport, and like beams out. So the doctor's like, crap, like he got away.
Before they finished whatever the heck they were doing to him.
Whatever they were doing. Now, the real Picard, and I had to write real in capital letters so that I convinced myself it was real. The real Picard fills him in on what happened. He was abducted 2 days into his mission on Telenus 4. They were using some sort of synaptic retrieval technique to extract sensitive data from his brain, which is a super scary concept. It was very
We've seen that a few times before on the show. It's like it's genious idea, but like it's really scary thought.
It's the scopolamine like truth serum thing.
Yeah.
And because, his kidnappers were one part of this like political unrest, they were trying to get information to wield power over the other because everything is all fucked up on the planet. So what was happening was his mind was creating barriers to protect itself. And in doing so, was returning to its most recent memories. So he was going back and forth between the play and the hospital he was in. And I'm like, was he actually in a hospital? He didn't actually kill someone, right?
No, he didn't actually kill someone. So what happens is because he remembers what happened as he's sitting talking now in sick bay is that whole story
in the ready room, you mean?
Yeah, in the ready room. That whole story of being in a dark alley where he got jumped and then he stabbed that guy and killed him. What really happened was he was in a dark alley. He did get jumped and he was taken to this hospital. He was taken to the facility where he like woke up at. So that was the most recent thing in his memory, that it was dark. He was scared. He got jumped, and then that's when they plugged the thing into his brain. So he never killed anyone, and he was never in an asylum. The asylum literally came from the frame of mind play, which was...
That's what it was. Okay.
So his mind was creating protective barriers to keep him from giving away sensitive information, similar to that episode you mentioned with the little kid or whatever. Yeah. It's like, to keep him from giving away sensitive information, he just kept thinking about the play and thinking about the play and thinking about the play. So part of it was on the Enterprise before the play. Part of it was what if the play was real? But all of that blocked him from ever saying their security command codes or phaser settings or anything like that. Yeah. They never got any information out of him. So yay for his subconscious, I guess. And that's what we discover. Like they were trying to get strategic information from his brain, but Beverly has healed all of the damage that they've done to his brain, which could have been
can we get
severe.
A hyperspray for that?
Seriously, like the woman's Big amazing. Time. that she can just like heal all the brain damage that they caused, like, which they didn't care about. And then in the last scene, we see Beverly and Riker in the theater, and the set is still up. This creepy set, which now has this, like, now the set is like super creepy. It's not just a set. Now it's like a crazy prison or who knows what.
Yeah.
And so Beverly's like, are you sure the stage crew and I, we're all going to do this tomorrow? And he's like, no, I can't sleep if I know that this still exists. And she's like, okay. So she leaves and he goes to tear down every single piece of that set with his bare hands, which has got to feel really cathartic and amazing. And hopefully he burns it. He probably recycled it.
I know.
It has to be destroyed.
My question is, who's the stage crew? Who's the stage crew on the Enterprise? I was like, probably, I mean, I guess if the actors can be officers, just whoever. I know, but I was like, y'all have a stage crew? First of all, do you need to build a set? And do you need to put it all together and dismantle it? Because can't you just like replicate a door, a wall, and then de-replicate it so that it can just be recycled? But I think that is what they did. I think
they replicated all those things to like make that set, and now he has to tear it all apart so it can be like recycled.
But I also
for the
feel
next play.
I feel like the Enterprise should be able to just like de-replicate that whole thing standing. It's like, okay, I've replicated the whole set and I'm going to de-replicate it.
Yeah, they don't de-replicate anything though. they don't do
I know, but well, you know what I mean? Like it like all gets recycled, right? Like old clothes and old water.
What they do, I don't think they show this on TNG, but they show it on Voyager. When they replicate or when they recycle things, they put it in the same space as the replicator. So like if it's old boots or shoes or clothes or whatever, they put it in the same place where they replicate tea and coffee. They just set it there, and then it just gets like
it just disappears.
It like dematerializes and gets recycled into that.
So maybe they had to break it into smaller pieces.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't think they ever showed on I might be wrong, but I don't think they ever showed on TNG. But my picture is that it has to go to a place. It doesn't have to be in that little cubby hole, but it has to be in a place where the stuff gets like recycled, some kind of recycling center, which I think is really cool. But here's the thing that I thought of for the first time that I've never thought of in all the times I've seen this episode before. We never find out what happened to that research team.
Oh, you're right.
So we were like, are they still there? Are they alive? Did someone else find them?
Because it doesn't seem like the mission was successful, because otherwise he would have come back with the team.
Or Picard would have said, hey, we found the team after you disappear, and then you disappear. Something, but it's like Team Shmeem. They get Riker back and they just go off into the distance like nothing ever happened.
That team is still underground in Telonis 4 being like, this necklace comm badge is supposed to work. Yeah, it's like,
I've never thought of that before until this time watching it, where I was like, wait a minute, we didn't close that loop. Like the whole reason he went to that planet was for a single solo mission, like
it sure was,
mission, and we didn't succeed, and we just left them to their fate. The end.
The end. So what were your final thoughts on this episode?
I really thought this showed Jonathan Frakes' range. You know, I know a lot of people think that he's such a ham actor, but I feel like this episode really shows what he can do. And maybe it was kind of hammy, but it's supposed to be when you're losing your mind.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was, I just think he did a really great job. It was very disturbing. It sort of had a happy ending because he didn't end up like crazy. But overall, I like this story, but it's definitely not in a top 10. It's not going on a rewatch list. It's too disturbing to be something to watch again. What were your final thoughts?
I mean, that's what it is. It's just, the whole thing is just super disturbing. I will never watch this one again. But I hate it because it's so well done. It's super deeply disturbing. It's a really well told story. I just never want to.
It's just like not a good story, right?
No,
like it's a well told story, but the story itself is not a good story you want to tell.
Awful. It's just awful. Where I'm like, oh dear God, this was horrific. Yeah. But other than that, I mean, good job, team. And Riker did a crazy good job on this. But oh my God, it really got under my skin, which is what it was supposed to do. Even Jonathan Frakes said it was a really dark and eerie episode to film, to act in and everything. It was just really awful.
I wouldn't be able to do it. Like when I picture myself being an Academy Award winning actress, as I'm ought to do, some scenes I'm like, nah, I couldn't do this one.
Not doing that.
This is one of those where I was like, I could not believably do any of this.
You know what? Let me win an Oscar for like writing cinematically on like a wild Mustang on like a panoramic long shot through like a valley or over some beach or something. But this, no, I am good.
I think I could do grief, like the scenes where they're like, no. I think I could do a good grief scene.
Yeah,
but
you can do that well.
but like a crazy scene or like a paranoid scene or something like that, I do not think I could
I'm
do
good.
that. I couldn't do it
Hard
believably
pass.
because I would not be willing to actually embody the emotions that you need to embody. Like, I'm very familiar with grief, so I can
Mhm.
embody that just like every day in the life, you know? But like this paranoid or traumatic or like, you know, scared, nervous, anxious, all this, I would be so unwilling to embody it to the level you need to make it convincing that I would never be convincing. And I would just
Absolutely
totally suck
not.
at this particular role.
Well, on that note, next week we are breaking down a very aptly named season 6, episode 22, Suspicions. Thank you guys so much for geeking out with us, and we'll catch you next week.
Bye. Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. We'll see you next time.